what's your background in astrology?
Well, I've been interested in astrology from a very young age, actually, as my aunt was an astrologer. And when she first showed me a chart, I must have been, 14, it seemed like I understood it. I was very fascinated by it. And then in the early 80s, I studied at the Faculty of Astrological Studies in London. And I've been a professional astrologer for over 20 years in the UK and the US, and I have international clients. And I've written 6 astrology books and given lectures and classes and done radio shows in different countries.
Brilliant. So loads of astrology experience. And for someone who's new to astrology who knows very little about it, how can you describe what it is in a nutshell?
In a nutshell, well, that's a difficult one. But astrology, as you know, Ben, it's an ancient art and science, too, that studies the influence of the planets on human behavior. And there are many different approaches to astrology. The type of astrology that really has fascinated me is called evolutionary or sometimes spiritual astrology, and I also like to call it karmic astrology, which others do too, because I regard the birth chart as a person's evolutionary journey through the lifetimes, their karmic pattern, if you like. And this will include, the interpretation includes all the challenges we face, from our emotional life to our family, to our career, to our finances, to our health, just like a regular chart. But I look at these from a higher, more spiritual perspective, which helps people, I found, to overcome their challenges in a very positive way, rather than feeling a victim or feeling there is nothing they can do to change things. So in the type of astrology I practice, it's not fatalistic, because we can, through knowledge and so on, change and transform our lives for the better.
So is it like about seeing the problems or potential triumphs coming up and working to avoid the worst of them and make the best of them?
Exactly. You can either say, a more fatalistic approach, which I've had readings from people who say, well, on this date this is going to happen, and quite likely it would. But my approach is, well, there's this tendency, this health tendency or whatever it is, but if you start working now, you can avoid, the worst of this and make it into a very positive experience, one, because after all, we're all learning, we're all growing, and even the most difficult experiences, and I've been through them myself, can be, or definitely are, growing experiences. And this is what karmic astrology teaches us.
Lovely. And you said astrology is the influence of the planets on our lives. So, the planets, we've got the Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. But your new book is called Earth, Astrology's Missing Planet, because we don't normally use Earth, do we? So what inspired you to write your book, Earth, Astrology's Missing Planet?
Well, actually, it began at the age of 4, because my grandmother left me all of the Alice Bailey books. Those books, Ben? They're very published by Lucis Trust, and one of them is Esoteric Astrology. Not that I was reading them at age 4, but I had them in my library. And in the book Esoteric Astrology, the Ascended Master Dwal Kul, who channeled these many books through Alice Bailey, said at some point astrologers would have to take into account the influence of the planet upon which we live. And I've read that over and over the many years. And also my own spiritual master or teacher, Dr. George King, the founder of the Aquarius Society, I was a close student of his for over 20 years, taught that the Earth is a very advanced living, breathing intelligence, and so forth. So I've always had this consciousness about the Earth and how important the Mother Earth is to all of us, and we tend to sort of treat her as just a resource, and there's so much more than that. So I was recovering from an illness a couple of years ago and had some time, and it just came to me, this was the time to write the book, when there's so much talk about concern about the future on this planet. And I think it's partly because we've become disassociated from the Earth, unlike the ancient cultures and civilizations that were much more attuned to the Earth.
Yeah, so reconnecting with the planet
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the subtitle of the book, Reconnecting with Her Sacred Power, because, as I say, I believe the Earth is a very advanced intelligence, as do many of the cultures, such as the Native Americans, for example, do believe that and perform rituals which are, in a way, giving back to the Earth and thanking and being appreciative of the Earth, which is kind of very unknown in the West.
Yeah, and also even in people who might be consider themselves sort of cynical or uber rational in the weather, extreme weather, and talk of global warming, there's the sense of there's an angry Earth, like the Earth is responding to what's been done to her.
Yeah, although I believe it's because of us again.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you couldn't blame the planet wasn't living intelligence, and there is a lot of scientific proof of that. It's not just me saying it or indigenous cultures saying it, but there is recent scientific evidence that indeed the Earth is a living intelligence, and you certainly wouldn't blame her for just, if she wanted to just flip on her axis and, we'd all be killed, she would. But I believe also she's very compassionate, because she could do that very easily. If you think about what we do on this planet, which for the most part is pretty awful, especially to the Earth. So I regard her as compassionate. And a lot of the things we've created on this Earth, I believe, including the weather, but that's a whole different subject.
Okay, got you. And are you the first person to write about this? Would you consider yourself a pioneer in arguing for the Earth to be considered in astrology?
As far as I'm aware, this is the first astrology book written that focuses exclusively on the influence of the Earth and why this is important to us. It's not a technical book just for astrologers, and I wrote it so that anyone can understand it and hopefully get a lot out of it. I also took a spiritual approach to help us to reestablish that long-forgotten connection with the Earth. And I wrote it from the perspective of the ancient living intelligence called Mother Earth, and I believe certainly this approach is unique in astrology.
And why do you think people haven't talked about this before? Why do you think astrology involves all the planets apart from the Earth?
Yeah, that's a difficult one. It's kind of like the elephant in the room. When I take classes and lectures, and some of the classes are, full of people completely new to astrology, and I mention the Earth, everybody thinks, well, yes, of course, we should take into account the influence of the planet, because we touch her every day, whereas the other planets, we don't. So it's one of those obvious things. So why? I don't know. I just think that this is a time of, I think it's because we've become so disassociated, actually, partly through the 17th century, the founders of modern science, like Newton and Bacon and so forth, and science became very mechanistic. And this approach, as you know, Ben, has been applied to reality as a whole, and that also kind of undercut the foundations of astrology. So I think it's partly that, and partly now, I think people are beginning to wake up with quantum field theorists explaining that everything is energy and everything is alive, including, of course, the Earth. And I think now is the time. So perhaps before we became very disassociated, and now I think things are changing, definitely. And now I think it's time to wake up to the fact that, yes, we must take into account, we have to, for our future, that we have this strong connection to the planet on which we live. And because after all, we couldn't exist. There'd be no future if it wasn't for the Earth. So this is the time, I believe.
Absolutely. And so people, even people who know nothing about astrology know what their sun sign is. And so if you're born for most of February, your sun will be in Aquarius, apart from at the end you'll be getting into Pisces. So is it fair to say you have an Earth sign?
Yes, everybody has an Earth sign, and it's a sign located exactly opposite the sun in your natal chart or horoscope. And so it's simple to find the Earth's location, because it's always exactly 180 degrees from the sun. If you're a Taurus, 15 degrees 36-minute Taurus, for example, if listeners know what that means, the Earth will be in the opposite sign, which is Scorpio, at 15 degrees, I think I said 36 minutes, off Scorpio. If it's Aries Sun, you'll have a Libra, the opposite sign of Libra Earth. If it's a Gemini Sun, it'll be the opposite sign of Sagittarius Earth, et cetera, et cetera. And in the book, it goes into that, and also goes into what that means. What does it mean to have Earth in Libra or Sagittarius? And I go into that. So you could call it Earth science, if you like.
And so how do you explain what it means for, say, so my sun is in Sagittarius, so my Earth sign will be Gemini. How do you explain the influence of my Earth sign from an astrological perspective?
Well, the Earth, I have to start with, is opposite the Sun, and the Sun, as you know, Ben, in astrology is our creativity, our character, our vitality, and it offers us a way to develop, the Earth, if you like, offers us a concrete way to develop creativity and character, and to use our vitality on the physical plane of this planet. It helps us, if you like, to build our dreams through actions. And the more, I believe, we understand our Earth sign, and the more we attune to her element, I think the more we will find it easier to make positive things happen rather than just thinking or dreaming about them. It's kind of like the energy that helps to bring our aspirations to life and to translate them into practical acts. And you could also look at the Earth sign as representing your Dharma as well. Now you say the Earth is our character, who we are becoming, and our self-realization. The Earth is the path, you could say, that allows us expression of ourselves through practical deeds. And we are able to, it's great that we can directly attune, well, as we can with the sun, to the Earth's energies in the summer, certainly, we are actually able, to directly attune to the Earth's energies through being in the nurturing presence of her fruits in nature. And this is very, very beneficial as well, and I talk about that in the book too. And it's the more conscious we become of Earth's energies, I believe, the more we can find our true path and manifest that. And also it will give us the power and strength to live up to this. And already people who've read the book, I know it's not yet published, but I have sent out review copies. One or two of them have said to me that by reading about their Earth sign, it has really helped them to find how to manifest their dreams. That's exactly what they've said to me.
That's really interesting. So it's like a missing piece in the puzzle, really.
I think it is. Yeah, I think that's a good way of looking at it, Ben. I really do.
And you're saying the Earth is a living intelligence, and people from the past have felt that or known that very strongly. And you mentioned this scientific evidence. Can you talk about that for the Earth being alive?
Yeah. Now everybody knows James Lovelock in the Gaia hypothesis. I think that was 1979. He first proposed the idea, certainly scientifically, that the Earth is a single living entity. And I think there was a series, wasn't there, in England? I was living in the US at the time, about that, Gaia.
Yeah.
Also, going further back than that, in the 18th century, James Hutton, who was called the father of geology, described the Earth as a type of superorganism. So he wasn't the only one. There's a wonderful book, Ben, called The Breathing Earth by John Nelson, and he was able to put together, this is fantastic, a year's worth of the seasonal transformations of the Earth and what these look like from outer space. And then once these are arranged in a sequence, you can see the Earth's in and out movement as if she's breathing. And scientists today were very, very surprised to find that the planet actually takes a quick, and they call it a breath, every few days, and that was totally unexpected.
Wow.
Also, there's another proof too about the Schumann resonance. I don't know if you want me to talk about that, Ben.
Yes, please, because you've also written about that and in articles aside from your book. So yeah, what is the Schumann resonance and what is the Schumann resonance and how does it correspond to the life of the Earth? Yeah,
that's also included this research in the book too. And it's another proof that the Earth has a living intelligence. And it's very fascinating. In 1953, Professor Schumann, the University of Munich, first discovered that the Earth produces very specific vibrational pulsations. That frequency was 7.83 hertz. And this came to be known as the Schumann resonance, and other people call it the Earth's heartbeat. And I prefer the latter, the Earth's heartbeat. We have a breathing Earth, and now we have an Earth with a heartbeat. And this research led to finding that there is a correlation between, and this is fascinating too, the Earth's heartbeat and the brain rhythms of humans. And they found that when people are given an exposure to the exact frequency of the Earth, their health stabilizes. And in fact, professor from the Max Planck Institute, I think it's Professor Weaver, said that he proved that when we're out of sync with this, it affects us negatively. And he did this by building an underground bunker which blocked out magnetic fields, including that frequency. And he got young, healthy volunteers to live there for about a month. And they all suffered tremendously from migraines and emotional distress. And afterwards, once they were back again in the Earth's frequency, they recovered. And the physical condition of astronauts, the early astronauts, deteriorated severely in outer space, as most of us know. The Russian Space Agency first discovered that by placing Schumann wave generators in spacecraft that mimic this frequency of the Earth, the health of the astronauts improved, especially their bone density. And later on, NASA included these in the space station. So it's very important for us to be attuned to this frequency. And there are ways to do this, which again, I include in the book. Yeah. There's an ancient practice where we draw energy directly from the Earth, and there's connection with the fruits of the Earth, nature, and in many powerful ways we can do this.
And do you think that the more we understand the Earth's energies, like watching it breathe, through space, and understanding the Schumann resonance, the more we can improve our life currently on the planet?
Absolutely. I think the more we understand anything in life, the more we can appreciate it and the more we can change for the better. I think this really is a secret. There is this growing awareness, as you know, Ben, of the interconnectedness of everything, thanks partly to the quantum physicists and so on. And also they have discovered, as you know, that we have an impact on everything and also on the Earth's processes. Not only does she impact us, obviously, but we also impact her. And I think because of these realizations, these scientific revelations, which the mystics have known and the indigenous cultures have known for thousands of years, we can no longer think of ourselves as separate from each other or from the Earth. And everything we do affects each other and affects the Earth, good, bad, and indifferent. I mean, James Lovelock, I mentioned earlier, he actually said recently he thinks it's too late for us to do anything to preserve our planet, our future, our civilization. But I believe, and in fact, the work of my spiritual teacher, Dr. George King, spent much of his life finding ways to help humanity to understand and give thanks back to this great living intelligence as part of his mission. He said we should put the Earth at the center of our spiritual lives. He wasn't saying that it's more important than God or the Creator or whatever your religious belief is, but he was stressing the importance of her, not just as a resource, but to do everything in our power to give back. Perhaps we're working in environmental ways or through our, rituals, through our appreciation, expressed, and so on. And we have to learn, I believe, this deep respect and appreciation for life generally, for all the blessings we have in life, but especially for this great goddess, if you like, who gives us everything we need to continue our journey.
Lovely, beautiful. And so, why should people read your book, even if they don't know anything about astrology?
Well, it's because I didn't write it as a technical book on purpose. Not that I do write those types of astrology books, actually. I try, because astrology is such a great tool, isn't it, Ben? I mean, it's so wonderful. It's a wonderful study. But the problem is with astrology that people tend to, they read a few books and then they want to get into it seriously, and it becomes quite complex. And I think because it is such a practical tool that everyone can use, I write these books, and Dodona Books has published all my astrology books. I love Dodona Books. And basically I'm writing books so that everyone can understand and use this fantastic tool. And so everyone can understand Earth, astrologer's missing planet. I certainly don't say it's the best astrology book you're going to see, but I'm going to say it's one of the most accessible books for everybody. And I think it's important too for everyone, every person who's interested in new thought, perhaps they're new age thinkers, they might be metaphysicians, they might be astrologers, they might be interested in different aspects of new thought throughout the world. Everybody has something in common, that I think we're all concerned about our future. We all want to, in our different ways, want to help bring peace and sanity and change things for our children and our children's children. And so I wrote it in a practical way so that we can not only improve ourselves and reconnect with the earth, but through the practices in it and the things in it, I wrote it in a way that we can have hope, that we can change things for the future too.
And having read it, it definitely is that crystal clear and accessible. And also what's coming across talking to you and comes across in the book is your knowledge and passion for re-engaging and re-loving the earth. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Ben. It's been wonderful talking to you.